The coup began at dawn. Admiral Thane's warships surrounded the capital city. Soldiers loyal to him occupied government buildings and communication centers. High Chancellor Voron broadcast a message to the entire empire, declaring that Queen Seraphine was unfit to rule. He said she had been corrupted by alien influence. He said she must be removed for the good of the Valorian people. Danny watched the chaos unfold from the window of the Queen's chambers. Ships filled the sky, their weapons charged and ready. The streets below were filled with soldiers in black armor. "This is my fault," Danny said. Seraphine stood beside him, calm and focused. She had changed into battle armor, silver and purple plates that covered her body. She looked like a warrior goddess from ancient legends. "This was coming long before you arrived," she said. "Voron and Thane have been waiting for an excuse to seize power for decades. You simply gave them one. What do? We fight." Seraphine turned to face him. "But first, I must get you to safety. The human ship is still docked at the orbital station. Captain Bennett can take you away from here." "No," Danny shook his head. "I am not running away while you fight alone. Danny, this is not your war. You made it my war when you saved my life. When you chose me over your own advisors." He took her hands. "I am not a soldier. I cannot fight like you can. But I am an engineer. Let me help in the way I know how." Seraphine studied his face for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "What do you need?" "Access to Thane's flagship systems. If I can get close enough, I can disable their defense grid. Their ships would be vulnerable. That would require boarding his vessel. It would be extremely dangerous." "I know, but it might be the only way to end this quickly." The Queen considered the plan. Outside, the sound of weapons fire echoed through the city. Time was running out. "Very well," Seraphine said. "But you will not go alone. I will take you there myself." They left the palace through a secret passage that led to an underground hangar. A small, fast ship waited for them there. Seraphine piloted while Danny studied the schematics of Thane's flagship that she had pulled from the military database. The trip through the battle was terrifying. Energy weapons streaked through space around them. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Danny had never seen real combat before. It was nothing like the simulations he had trained on. "There," Seraphine said, pointing through the viewport. "The Sovereign Might, Thane's flagship." The ship was massive, a dark triangle of metal bristling with weapons. It hung in space like a mountain, commanding the rebel fleet. "How do we get inside?" Danny asked. "Maintenance hatch on the lower hull. It is designed for emergency repairs. Security will be minimal because they do not expect anyone to be foolish enough to approach during battle. Then let us be foolish." Seraphine smiled grimly and pushed the ship forward. They docked without being detected. The maintenance hatch opened easily, and they slipped inside the enemy vessel. Danny's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The corridors of the Sovereign Might were cold and dark. Warning lights flashed red. The crew was focused on the battle outside, not on internal security. Danny and Seraphine moved quickly through the ship, avoiding patrols when they could and eliminating them when they could not. "The main control room is 2 levels up," Seraphine whispered. "The defense grid is controlled from there." They climbed through access tunnels and empty cargo bays. Every second felt like an hour. At any moment, they could be discovered and killed. Finally, they reached the control room. 2 technicians sat at computer terminals, monitoring the battle. Seraphine moved like lightning, striking both of them unconscious before they could react. "The console is yours," she said. "Work fast." Danny ran to the nearest terminal and began typing. The Valorian system was different from human technology, but the basic principles were the same. Power systems, communication networks, defense protocols. He understood machines. He understood how to break them. "I am in," he said. "The defense grid is linked to the central power core. If I overload the coupling, it will shut down everything." "Do it." Danny entered the commands. Warning messages flashed on the screen. The ship began to shake. "Defense grid is offline," he announced. "All weapons are disabled." Outside, the rebel fleet was suddenly vulnerable. The Queen's loyal forces pressed their advantage, destroying ship after ship. The tide of battle turned in minutes, but they were not finished yet. The door to the control room burst open. Admiral Thane stood in the doorway, a massive blade in his hand. His face was twisted with rage. "You!" he roared, pointing at Danny. "You have ruined everything." He charged forward, faster than Danny could react. The blade swung toward Danny's head. Sci-Fi intercepted the blow. She caught Thane's arm and twisted, forcing him back. The two Valorians faced each other, ancient powers preparing for combat. "Stand down, Thane," Seraphine commanded. "It is over. Your fleet is destroyed. Your allies are scattered. You have lost. I would rather die than see our empire corrupted by human filth." Thane spat the words like poison. "You have betrayed everything we stand for. Emotions make us weak. Attachments make us vulnerable. You have forgotten what it means to be Valorian." "No." Seraphine's voice was steady and clear. "I have remembered what it means to be alive. We did not evolve beyond emotion. We simply buried it. We became cold and empty, machines pretending to be people. The humans reminded me of what we lost. Then you are truly lost." Thane raised his blade and attacked. The fight was brief but brutal. Thane was a warrior who had spent centuries perfecting his skills. But Seraphine was something more. She was a queen with power that went beyond physical strength. Energy crackled around her hands as she blocked his strikes. Finally, she caught his blade with her bare hand. Blood dripped from her palm, but she did not flinch. "Yield," she said. Thane looked into her eyes. He saw no weakness there, no fear. He saw only determination and power beyond anything he could match. His blade clattered to the floor. He fell to his knees. "It is over," Seraphine said. "Guards, take him away." Soldiers loyal to the Queen flooded into the room. They seized Thane and dragged him out. The coup was finished. In the days that followed, order was restored to the Empire. Voran and Thane were imprisoned for their crimes. Those who had supported them were given a choice: accept the new order or face exile. But the real change was deeper than politics. Queen Seraphine addressed her people in a broadcast that reached every corner of the Empire. "For too long, we have told ourselves that emotion is weakness," she said. "We have stripped away the parts of ourselves that make life meaningful. We have become powerful but empty. Today, that changes. We will learn to feel again. We will learn what it means to be truly alive." The response was mixed. Some cheered. Some protested. But the seeds of change had been planted, and they would grow. Danny watched the broadcast from the Queen's chambers. Seraphine sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we build something new. A partnership between humans and Valorians. An exchange of culture and knowledge." She turned to look at him. "And you, Danny Cole, will be at the center of it. I do not know if I am ready for that. You have already changed an empire. I think you are more ready than you believe." Danny looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, the small planet he had left behind 3 years ago. He wondered what his family would think if they could see him now, sitting beside an alien queen who ruled 1,000 worlds. "I am still going to fix engines," he said. "That is what I am good at." Seraphine laughed. It was a beautiful sound, light and free. "Then fix engines." But perhaps you could also teach my people about humanity, about sweat and passion and messy, complicated feelings. That sounds like a lot of work. It will be, but we will do it together. Danny squeezed her cold hand gently. She squeezed back. Outside, the stars burned bright against the darkness. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and dangers. But for the first time in a long time, it was also full of hope. The engineer from Ohio and the queen of 1,000 worlds. It was an impossible story. But then again, the best stories always are. 1 year later, Danny was back in the engine room of a new ship, the Harmony, built to be a symbol of human and Valorian cooperation. He was covered in sweat, his hands dirty with grease, a wrench in his grip. The door opened. Queen Seraphine walked in, still beautiful, still ancient, still glowing with power. She did not speak. She simply breathed in deeply, smiled, and sat down to watch him work. Some things never changed. And that was exactly how Danny wanted it. 30 years earlier, the universe was a different place. Humanity had barely left its home system. Their ships were slow and clumsy. Their technology was generations behind the great empires. Most humans had never seen an alien, had never traveled beyond the colonies of Mars and the moons of Jupiter. Daniel Cooper was 26 years old. He worked as a miner on the edge of explored space, digging for rare metals in the rocks of distant moons. It was lonely work, dangerous work. Most miners lasted a few years before the isolation broke them. But Daniel was patient. He liked the quiet. He liked being alone with his thoughts. His claim was on a small moon called Varan 7. It orbited a gas giant in a system that no government had claimed. The air was thin but breathable. The days were short and cold. Daniel lived in a small shelter made of metal panels and recycled ship parts. He had food for 6 months, water recyclers that worked most of the time, and a radio that could reach the nearest human settlement in about 3 weeks. If he needed help, he did not expect visitors. One night, he woke to the sound of thunder. But there was no storm on Varan 7. The atmosphere was too thin for weather. Daniel pulled on his boots and stepped outside to look at the sky. A ship was falling. It was burning as it came down, a streak of orange fire against the black sky. Daniel watched it crash into the rocks about 2 miles from his shelter. The impact shook the ground beneath his feet. A plume of dust rose into the air and hung there in the low gravity. Daniel stood very still. His mind was racing. A ship meant people. People meant trouble. He was mining illegally on unclaimed territory. If someone found him here, he could lose everything. But he could not ignore a crash. Someone might be hurt. Someone might be dying. He went back inside and gathered supplies. A medical kit, extra oxygen, a light, a knife for protection. Then he climbed onto his small ground vehicle and drove toward the crash site. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was shaped like a teardrop, made of metal that shimmered with colors he could not name. Strange symbols were carved into its hull. The rear section was destroyed, torn apart by whatever weapon had brought it down. The front section was mostly intact but buried in the rocks. Daniel approached slowly. He had his knife in his hand, but it felt foolish. Whatever built this ship was far beyond anything humans could make. A knife would not help him if they wanted him dead. He found the entrance on the side of the ship. It was open, the door hanging loose from broken hinges. Inside, the air smelled like copper and something sweet, like flowers. Emergency lights flickered red in the darkness. There were bodies. 4 of them. Tall creatures with scales and multiple eyes, their forms twisted in death. They had been soldiers, Daniel realized. They wore armor and carried weapons that looked like nothing he had ever imagined. And then he heard breathing. It came from the back of the cabin, weak and wet, Daniel moved toward it, stepping over the bodies, pushing aside fallen equipment. And there, in a corner, he found her. She was smaller than the others. Younger, maybe. Her scales were pale blue, almost gray, and they were covered in dark blood. 2 of her 4 eyes were closed. The other 2 watched him approach with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. She tried to speak. Strange sounds came from her mouth, clicking and hissing. Daniel did not understand the word. "It is okay," he said. He knew she could not understand him either, but he hoped his voice would calm her. "I am not going to hurt you. I want to help." He knelt beside her and looked at her wounds. A large piece of metal was stuck in her side. Her left arm was bent at a wrong angle. Burns covered her legs. She was dying. That much was clear, that Daniel had no idea how to help an alien. He did not know her biology, her chemistry, her needs. Everything he knew about medicine was based on human bodies. This creature was as different from him as a fish from a bird. But he had to try. He pulled out his medical kit and got to work. He cleaned the wounds as best he could with water and antiseptic. He pulled the metal fragment from her side as gently as possible, and she screamed in that strange clicking language. He wrapped bandages around the wound and hoped they would hold. She grabbed his hand with her clawed fingers. Her grip was weak but desperate. Her eyes locked on his face. She was terrified. She was in pain. And she was completely alone. "I will not leave you," Daniel said. "Do you understand? I will stay with you." She did not understand his words, but something in his voice seemed to reach her. She relaxed slightly. Her grip on his hand loosened. Daniel made a decision. He could not save her here in the wreckage. He needed to bring her back to his shelter where he had better supplies, better warmth, better light. It would be dangerous. Moving her could kill her, but staying here would kill her for certain. He found a piece of flat metal that could serve as a stretcher. He lifted her onto it as carefully as he could. She cried out again, that clicking scream of pain, but she did not fight him. She let him carry her out of the ship and into the cold night air. The drive back to his shelter took an hour. Daniel went slowly, avoiding every bump and rock he could. The alien girl lay behind him, her breathing shallow and fast. Several times, he stopped to check on her, to make sure she was still alive. She was alive. Barely. He brought her inside his shelter and laid her on his own bed. He turned up the heat as high as it would go. He found his spare oxygen tank and set it beside her face, letting the clean air flow over her dot. Then he began the long work of keeping her alive. For 11 days, Daniel did not sleep more than an hour at a time. He cleaned her wounds and changed her bandages. He dripped water into her mouth and hoped she could digest it. He watched her fever rise and fall, her scales changing color from gray to purple to blue and back again. He talked to her constantly. He told her about his life, his childhood, his dreams. He knew she could not understand, but the sound of his voice seemed to comfort her. When she was awake, her eyes would follow him around the room. When she was asleep, she would reach for his hand, and he would hold it until she calmed. On the 5th day, she spoke her first word that he could understand. She pointed at herself and said, "Varens." "Virenus," Daniel repeated. "Is that your name?" She nodded. Then she pointed at him. "Daniel," he said. "My name is Daniel." She tried to say it. "Daniel." Her mouth was not made for human sounds, but she tried anyway. He smiled at her effort, and she made a sound that might have been a laugh. After that, they began to teach each other. Simple words at first. Water, food, pain, help. Daniel drew pictures in the dust to explain what he meant. Virenus used gestures and sounds. Slowly, painfully, they built a bridge between their worlds. On the 11th night, Daniel heard ships in the sky. He looked out his window and saw 3 vessels descending toward the crash site. They were beautiful ships, sleek and powerful, marked with the same symbols he had seen on the wreckage. Her people had come for her. Daniel looked at Virenus. She was awake, watching him with all 4 of her eyes. She had heard the ships too. She knew what they meant. "Your people," Daniel said. "They found you." She reached for his hand and held it tight. "You have to go," he said. "They will take you home. They will make you better. Better than I ever could." She said something in her language. He did not understand the words, but he understood the feeling behind them. She did not want to leave. She did not want to say goodbye, but she had to. They both knew it. Daniel helped her to the door. He watched from the shadows as soldiers found her and carried her onto their ship. She looked back at his shelter, searching for him, but the night was dark and he was hidden. The ships lifted off and disappeared into the sky. And Daniel was alone again. He never told anyone what happened. He kept the secret buried deep inside him. But he never forgot the alien girl with purple scales who had held his hand in the darkness. And she never forgot him either. Queen Virenus sat alone in her private chambers on the station. The room was dark. She had dismissed her servants and her guards. She needed silence. She needed time to think. Her hands were still shaking. Her scales kept shifting from silver to blue and back again, a sign of emotional turmoil that she could not control. In 28 years as queen, she had never lost control like this. Not once, but then, she had never expected to see him again. Daniel. His name was Daniel. She closed her eyes and let the memories wash over her. The crash. The pain. The darkness of the ruined ship where she lay dying among the bodies of her guards. She had been 17 years old, 3rd in line to the throne, on a simple scouting mission that should have been safe. The raiders had come from nowhere. Their weapons had torn through her ship like paper. Her guards had died protecting her. She had crawled into a corner and waited for death. Then he had come, a human, the first alien she had ever seen. He was strange and soft, with only 2 eyes and skin that did not change color. He spoke in sounds she could not understand. But his hands had been gentle. His voice had been kind. And he had saved her life. Virenus opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling. How many times had she thought about him over the years? How many nights had she dreamed of that small shelter on the frozen moon? The warmth of his hand holding hers. The sound of his voice telling her stories she could not understand. After her rescue, she had tried to find him. She had sent agents to search the system where she had crashed. But humans were scattered across many worlds, and their records were poor. She did not even know his name back then. All she had was a memory of his face and the sound of his voice saying words she had since learned to speak. Years passed. Her 2 older siblings died in a war for succession, killed by cousins who wanted the throne. Virenus, the youngest, the one nobody expected, found herself next in line. She had to fight for her crown. She had to kill those who threatened her. She had to become hard and cold and strong. She became queen at the age of 22. She took her empire and made it powerful. She conquered worlds and crushed rebellions. She became the unbroken monarch, feared across the galaxy. But inside, she was still that dying girl on the frozen moon. Inside, she still remembered what it felt like to be helpless and afraid, and to have someone choose to help her for no reason at all. The Zelthari did not help for free. Her people calculated every action, weighed every cost and benefit. Mercy was weakness. Kindness was a tool to be used against others. The strong survived and the weak died. That was the way of things. Daniel had shown her something different. He had helped her when he had nothing to gain. He had risked everything to save a creature he had never seen before. He had held her hand through the long nights and asked for nothing in return. She had never forgotten. Now he was here, on this station, standing guard outside a doorway in a simple uniform. He was old now, his youth gone, his body worn down by time. But his eyes were the same. That warm brown color that had looked at her with such kindness 30 years ago, and he remembered her. She had seen it in his face. That moment of recognition, that small smile. He knew exactly who she was. Viranus stood and walked to the window. Outside, the station floated in the darkness, surrounded by the ships of 100 nations. The diplomatic summit was supposed to be her triumph. She was supposed to show the galaxy her strength, to remind them why the Zelthari were feared. Instead, she could not stop thinking about a human guard with gray in his hair. Across the station, in the small human quarters, Daniel Cooper was having his own struggle. He sat on the edge of his bed and stared at the wall. His shift had ended an hour ago, but he could not sleep. His mind was too full. She was alive. More than alive. She was queen of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The wounded girl he had carried from a crashed ship had become something beyond his imagination. Daniel thought about the years since that night on Voran 7. He had left the mining business soon after. He could not stop thinking about the alien girl, about her people, about the universe beyond his tiny world. He had wanted to learn more, to understand more, to see more. He had joined the Earth Space Corps. He had worked his way up through the ranks, not as a pilot or a scientist, but as security. He was good at watching, at waiting, at keeping people safe. It suited him. When humanity finally made official contact with the galaxy, Daniel was one of the first to volunteer for the diplomatic service. He told himself it was because he wanted to serve his species, to help build bridges with alien civilizations. But that was not the whole truth. The truth was that he wanted to find her. He had watched her rise to power through news reports and intelligence briefings. He had learned her name, her title, her history. He had seen images of her standing before crowds of millions, her scales deep purple with confidence, her four eyes surveying her empire. And he had wondered if she ever thought about him. Now he knew. She had frozen at the sight of him. The most powerful queen in the galaxy had stopped in her tracks because she saw his face. She remembered everything. Daniel did not know what to do with this knowledge. He was nobody. A guard. A servant. She was a queen who ruled over billions. The gap between them was too vast to measure. But for 11 days, 30 years ago, they had been two people trying to survive together. They had taught each other words. They had held hands in the darkness. They had shared something real. Did that mean anything now? Could it mean anything? He did not know. He could not know. But he felt the weight of those memories pressing on his chest, demanding something from him. Meanwhile, Karth knocked on the door of his queen's chambers. "My queen? The Torvan ambassador has requested a meeting. He wishes to discuss the border dispute." Viranus took a deep breath. She forced her scales to return to their normal purple. She straightened her spine and lifted her chin. "Tell him I will meet with him tomorrow," she said. Her voice was steady now. The queen was back in control. "Of course, my queen. Also, the human delegation has requested an audience. Their ambassador wishes to introduce herself." Viranus felt her heart speed up. "The humans, where Daniel worked. I will consider their request," she said carefully. "Leave me now." Karth bowed and left. Viranus stood alone in the darkness. She was the unbroken monarch. She had never shown weakness to anyone. She had built walls around her heart so high that no one could climb them. But Daniel had been inside those walls before the walls existed. He had known her when she was just a frightened girl with no power and no title. He had seen her at her weakest and had not turned away. She made a decision. Tomorrow, she would meet with the human delegation. She would see Daniel again. She would find out if the man she remembered still existed. Or if time had changed him as much as it had changed her, it was a risk. It was weakness. But she had to know 30 years was a long time to wonder. The diplomatic summit was in its final day. Representatives from every major power had gathered in the Central Assembly Hall, a massive dome of glass and steel that looked out on the stars. Thousands of beings sat in rows that curved around the central stage. Cameras broadcast to billions of viewers across the galaxy. Ambassador Lara Mitchell sat with the human delegation in the back rows, where minor powers were always placed. She still did not understand what had happened in the Queen's chamber. Daniel had refused to explain, saying only that it was personal and that everything would make sense soon. She did not believe him, but she also trusted him. After 15 years of service, she knew Daniel Cooper was not the kind of man who lied or kept secrets without good reason. The summit had been productive in small ways. Trade agreements had been signed. Border disputes had been discussed. Nothing dramatic had happened. The Zelthari delegation had been quiet, which was unusual. Queen Vironess had attended only the most important sessions and had said little. Now the summit was ending. The final session was meant for closing statements, for empty words about cooperation and peace. Lavra expected nothing interesting. She was wrong. Queen Vironess rose from her seat. She walked to the central stage without waiting for permission, without being announced. The other delegations fell silent as she approached the podium. No one spoke when the unbroken monarch moved. "I have an announcement," Vironess said. Her voice filled the hall without amplification, strong and clear. The Zelthari Empire has decided to form a formal alliance with the Earth Confederacy. The hall erupted in whispers. Lavra felt her jaw drop. The humans around her were staring at each other in disbelief. This was impossible. The Zelthari did not make alliances. They conquered. They dominated. They did not partner with anyone. Certainly not with a species as weak and small as humanity. Vironess waited for the noise to die down. Then she continued. This alliance will include full trade agreements, technology sharing, and mutual defense pacts. The terms are favorable to Earth. We ask nothing in return except friendship and cooperation. The Torvan ambassador stood up. This is madness. What could humans possibly offer the Zelthari? They have nothing you need. Their ships are primitive. Their weapons are weak. What is the purpose of this alliance? Vironess turned to look at him. Her scales shifted to a darker shade of purple, the color of warning. "I did not ask for your opinion," she said. "Sit down." The Torvan ambassador sat. Vironess looked out over the assembled representatives. Her 4 eyes swept across the hall, measuring each face, each reaction. "You want to know why I have chosen humanity," she said. "I will tell you. But first, I will tell you a story." She paused. The hall was completely silent. 30 years ago, I was a princess, third in line to the throne. I was young and foolish, and I took risks that I should not have taken. My ship was attacked. My guards were killed. I crashed on a barren moon in a system far from my empire. Lavra leaned forward in her seat. She had never heard this story. No one had. "I was dying," Vironess continued. "My wounds were severe. My life support was failing. I had no hope of rescue. I lay in the wreckage of my ship and waited for death." She turned slightly, and her eyes found Daniel Cooper in the back row. Lavra followed her gaze. "And then a human found me." The hall began to murmur again. Vironess raised a hand, and silence returned. He was a miner, a simple man working alone on the edge of explored space. He had never seen an alien before. He did not know who I was. He did not know that my people were powerful, that my family was royal, that saving me could bring him reward or punishment. Vironess walked down from the podium. She moved through the rows of seats, and the representatives pulled back from her as she passed. She walked all the way to the back of the hall, to where the human delegation sat. She stopped in front of Daniel Cooper. He did not care about any of that, Vironus said. He saw a wounded creature, and he chose to help. He gave me his food, his water, his oxygen. He cleaned my wounds with medicine meant for humans and hoped it would work. He held my hand through the fever and talked to me, even though I could not understand his words. Daniel stood up slowly. His face was pale, but his eyes were steady. For 11 days, he kept me alive, Vironus said. He asked for nothing in return. He did not even tell me his name. When my people came to rescue me, he hid. He watched me leave, and he never tried to find me. He never told anyone what happened. She reached out and took Daniel's hand in hers. The camera zoomed in. Across the galaxy, billions of viewers watched in stunned silence. His name is Daniel Cooper, Vironus said, and he taught me something that I had never learned in all my years as a Zelthari. He taught me that strength is not about power. It is not about conquest or domination. True strength is the choice to help someone when you have nothing to gain. True strength is compassion. She turned to face the assembly, still holding Daniel's hand. I have thought about this human every day for 30 years. He changed me. He made me question everything I knew about power and weakness, about strength and mercy. I became queen, and I ruled as my people expected me to rule. But inside, I always remembered the man who helped me for no reason except that it was right. The Torvan ambassador spoke again, his voice sharp with contempt. This is sentiment, emotion. It has no place in galactic politics. Vironus looked at him with all 4 eyes. No? Then explain to me why humanity has survived. She let go of Daniel's hand and walked back toward the center of the hall. Humans are weak, she said. Everyone knows this. Their bodies are fragile. Their technology is primitive. They should have been conquered long ago, and yet they persist. They spread across the stars. They make friends with every species they meet. They help strangers, share resources, build bridges instead of walls. She stopped in the center of the hall and turned in a slow circle, looking at each delegation. I asked myself why. I studied humanity for years, trying to understand. And I finally realized the truth. Humans are strong because they care about each other. They survive because they help each other. Their greatest weapon is not their ships or their technology. Their greatest weapon is their hearts. She looked back at Daniel, who was still standing in the back row. One human saved my life when he had every reason to walk away. If one human can show such nobility, what might all of humanity be capable of? That is what I want to find out. That is why I offer this alliance. The hall was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the other delegations began to applaud. It started small, just a few hands clapping in the darkness. But it grew and grew, until the entire assembly was on its feet, applauding the queen who had shown them something new. Later, after the summit ended and the ships departed, Daniel Cooper stood on the observation deck and watched the stars. Vironus found him there. She stood beside him without speaking, and together they looked out at the universe. You could have kept a secret, Daniel said finally. You did not have to tell anyone. I know, Vironus said, but I wanted to. I spent 30 years hiding what you taught me. I do not want to hide anymore. Daniel smiled. What happens now? I have appointed you as the official Zelthari liaison to Earth. You will live on my homeworld. Advise my council. Help build the alliance between our peoples. Daniel turned to look at her. That is a lot of responsibility. You can handle it. You kept me alive for 11 days with nothing but hope and kindness. Building peace between 2 civilizations should be easy in comparison. Daniel laughed. It was a warm sound, full of life. I missed you, he said quietly. Every day for 30 years I missed you. Vironus took his hand again. Her scale shifted to a soft blue, the color of peace, the color of joy. I missed you too, she said. But we are together now, and we have a lot of work to do. They stood together on the observation deck, the human and the queen, looking out at the stars. Behind them, a galaxy watched with wonder. Ahead of them, a future waited to be built, and it all began because one man chose to help a stranger on a frozen moon 30 years ago, when no one was watching and there was nothing to gain. That was humanity's gift to the universe, not technology, not weapons, not power. Compassion. And in the end, that made all the difference. The message arrived the next morning. The human delegation was invited to meet with Queen Virenus in her private council chamber. No other delegations were included. No other species were informed. Ambassador Laura Mitchell read the message 3 times. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and silver hair, a career diplomat who had spent 40 years negotiating with difficult people. But this was new. The Zelthari had ignored humanity for decades. They had voted against humans joining the Galactic Council. They had dismissed Earth as a minor power not worth their time. Why would their queen suddenly want to meet? She called her staff together. Does anyone have any idea what this is about? Nobody did? Maybe they want something from us, said her assistant, a young man named Kevin Park. Technology we have that they do not. We do not have anything they want, Laura said. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. This makes no sense. She looked at Daniel Cooper, who stood near the door in his security uniform. He was supposed to be off duty, but he had come anyway when he heard about the meeting. His face was calm, but something flickered in his eyes. Something that Laura could not read. Cooper, she said, you have been in the diplomatic service for 15 years. Have you ever heard of the Zelthari reaching out to a minor species like this? Daniel shook his head. No, Ambassador, never. Laura watched him for a moment. There was something strange about his answer. Something careful. But she did not have time to investigate. Fine, she said. We accept the meeting. Cooper, you will come with me as security. Kevin, you will stay here and monitor communications. Everyone else, be ready for anything. They walked through the station corridors toward the Zelthari section. Laura tried to prepare herself for what she might find. The queen was known for her cruelty, her intelligence, her absolute control. This could be a trap. It could be a test. It could be anything. The Zelthari guards at the entrance scanned them with strange devices that hummed and clicked. Then they were led through a series of hallways, each one larger and more decorated than the last. The walls were covered with artwork showing battles and conquests. The floors were polished stone that reflected the light like water. Finally, they reached the council chamber. It was a circular room with high ceilings and windows that looked out on the stars. A single chair sat at the far end, raised on a platform. And in that chair sat Queen Virenus. She was even more impressive up close. Her scales were deep purple, almost black in the dim light. Her 4 amber eyes reflected Laura like mirrors. She wore robes of silver and gold that flowed around her like liquid metal. She did not move as they approached. Laura bowed her head respectfully. Your Majesty, thank you for this meeting. I am Ambassador Laura Mitchell of the Earth Confederacy. Virenus looked at her without expression. Then her eyes moved past Laura to Daniel, who stood 2 steps behind. Leave us, she said. Laura blinked. I'm sorry? You may go, Ambassador. I wish to speak with your guard alone. Laura felt her face go red. This was an insult, a deliberate dismissal. She was the ambassador, the official representative of Earth. To be thrown out while a simple guard remained was unthinkable, but Daniel stepped forward. It is okay, Ambassador. Laura turned to stare at him. Cooper, what are you talking about? Daniel met her eyes. His face was still calm, but there was something beneath it now. Something old and deep and complicated. Please, Ambassador. Trust me. I will explain everything later. Lara wanted to argue. Every instinct told her this was wrong. Every instinct told her this was wrong. But something in Daniel's voice made her hesitate. There was no fear in it. No confusion. He knew what was happening. He understood something she did not. She looked at the Queen, then back at Daniel. If anything happens to you, I will hold the Zelthari responsible. Nothing will happen, Daniel said. I promise. Lara took a deep breath. Then she turned and walked out of the chamber. The doors closed behind her with a soft sound. Daniel and Viranus were alone. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The Queen sat on her throne, looking down at him. Daniel stood in the center of the room, looking up at her. The distance between them was vast. The gap in their power was beyond measuring, but it did not feel that way. It felt like they were back on that frozen moon, two people trying to survive together. Viranus stood. She walked down from her platform, her robes trailing behind her. She stopped a few feet from Daniel, close enough that he could see the tiny scales on her face, the patterns that were unique to her alone. I never knew your name, she said. Her voice was different now, softer, less commanding. She spoke in English, the words slow and careful. I searched for you. For years, I searched, but I did not know what to look for. I know, Daniel said. I watched you search. I saw your agents in the system, but I was afraid. I did not know what you would do if you found me. What do you mean? Daniel looked down at his hands. They were old hands now, wrinkled and spotted with age. Your people do not help for free. I knew that much. I thought maybe you would see me as a threat. Someone who knew your secret. Someone who had seen you when you were weak. Viranus flinched. It was a small movement, barely visible, but Daniel saw it. You thought I would kill you, she said. I did not know what to think. You were a princess, then a queen. You ruled an empire. I was nobody. A minor, a guard. What claim did I have on your memory? Viranus was silent for a moment. Then she did something that would have shocked her entire empire. She lowered herself to one knee. Her eyes came level with his. Her face was inches from his face. You saved my life, she said. You had nothing to gain. Your species did not even know mine existed. And yet you gave everything you had to keep me alive. Your food, your water, your oxygen. You held my hand through the fever. You talked to me even though I could not understand. You made me feel like I mattered. Daniel felt tears forming in his eyes. He tried to blink them away, but they came anyway. You did matter, he said. You were hurt. You were alone. Helping you was the right thing to do. Viranus reached out and took his hand. Her claws were gentle, barely touching his skin. The right thing, she repeated. My people do not think this way. We calculate. We plan. We use others for our benefit. But you helped me because it was right, not because it was useful. She stood again, but she did not let go of his hand. I have thought about you every day for 30 years, she said. I built an empire. I conquered worlds. I became powerful beyond measure. And still I wondered about the human who taught me that there was another way to be strong. Daniel looked into her 4 amber eyes. He saw the girl he had saved, still there beneath the Queen. Still wondering. Still hoping. I thought about you too, he said. Every day. I watched you become a legend. I was proud of you, even from so far away. Viranus made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. Proud of me? I am a conqueror. I have done terrible things. You survived, Daniel said. That is what matters. You survived, and you became something amazing. They stood together in the silence. Two people who had shared something real 30 years ago and had carried it with them ever since. What do we do now? Virenus asked. Daniel smiled. It was the same smile he had given her on that first night, when she was dying and he was the only hope she had. I do not know, he said. But we will figure it out together.